Thanks. Oh, got it. Well, I agree with you, Reggie, and I want to echo Bill Payne's comments, David, that I really appreciate your bringing this up, and it really needs a full discussion, and it'll probably be a discussion that rolls on over to the next board meeting too. I'm a little surprised actually at some of your proposals because I know how careful you have been with COVID. Would you really feel safe coming to an in-person meeting now with 20 other Rotarians at the coffee house, and masks aren't required, and half the people there aren't wearing masks? I'm surprised that you would feel comfortable even if you had a mask on.
Well, that's a good question, because I've asked myself that. I would have to see how I feel. I would go back, I would give it a try, and I would see if I'm the only one wearing a mask again. Guess what? I won't come back.
Yeah.
But if the board of directors will reach out to the membership and actively recommend these safety guidelines, I think we'll get more participation. That's what I'm hoping for. If we don't get it, well, guess what? The whole thing's going to flop. But if we don't try it, we will never know. So I'm willing to give that a try. I will come to the first meeting and let's see how people react to our recommendations. I think if we all will think, what's it called? Service above self. Forget I. Let's talk about the health of the group. And so we go back to our membership and say, we've worked this through, folks, and we want to get back to meetings. And here are the safety protocols. We hope that everyone will follow them, but maybe 9 out of 10 will. I would feel safe with 8 out of 10.
Well, I would echo
safe with 1 out of 10. Okay. So
I would echo also what Reggie said. And frankly, COVID has exploded so much right now. I mean, we've got 3 to 4 times the number of cases in Cape Charles as we've ever had before. Yeah, I know that Omicron is not as serious, but I don't think that the Rotary Club ought to be a vector for the dissemination of COVID in the community. And right now, like Reggie said, you have to take your mask off to eat. And I think with 16 people in the coffee house without masks on eating, you can't adequately socially distance while you're eating. So if somebody has COVID, and right now there's tons of people out there that are asymptomatic that have COVID and are spreading it, I think the risk of it being spread to other members of the club right now are very, very high. I share your disappointment that we can't meet in person. We fully intended to, starting the 1st of January, but then this Omicron took over and it just exploded the number of cases. So I like your idea, and I think a lot of the things you said are absolutely correct, but unfortunately, and it's highly disappointing to me too, I don't think now is the time. I think we really need to wait until the curve of the surge is on its way back down before we do that. And then I agree with virtually everything you said, except you've actually weakened some of the requirements that we have. And one of those requirements is that everybody has to be vaccinated. And we take their word for it, but that is a requirement. And that shouldn't become just a recommendation. It should be a requirement, I think.
Bill Murphy.
Bill Murphy. Are you muted?
You're muted, Bill.
Yeah, he's looking for it.
Yeah, I couldn't see the mute button without my glasses. Well, okay, I think what we're coming around to here is I go back to what I said earlier. If we look at David's motion and for a moment take the date of January 25th out of it. So if we were just voting on this to be the official club policy as far as safety precautions and what we're going to do once we do announce the date to start again, is that all participating members will be billed for meals, whether you come or not, which is no different than it's always been. If we look at it in terms of that and just say, okay, how do we feel about adopting this as it's written, except for the date? Maybe we could make the date flexible. In other words, if we pass it exactly as it's written, we've committed to going back on January 25th. And I think there's still a lot of room for a good debate about whether that's a good date or not. But I think by adopting the rest of it, we've done two things. We've
Well,
developed.
with one exception, Bill, I agree with Paul that everybody, shot should be mandatory.
Okay, well, we can change that. That's not a problem. See, we could tweak it, but what I want to do
Yeah.
is, at least if we don't accomplish everything today, and I doubt that we will, I'd like to at least get some type of official Rotary Club of Cape Charles policy in writing as regards COVID. And this is something we could send to all the members so that they know, hey, when we start back, we're going back to reset, just like we always have been. We're going to charge all the participating members for meals. We want you to come. Here are the safety precautions that we're going to require, that we're going to put in place for you, for your voluntary participation, except for the being vaccinated. I mean, just something like that, because we can't, if we wait until everything is obvious that it's time to go back and everything is good, I don't know. I don't know when that date is. I've thought it was coming 3 times now and it hasn't yet. So we've got to be able to retain a little bit of flexibility, but I really feel strongly that if we don't try to pull the club back together, we are going to fall by the wayside with a lot of members. So, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I'd like to adopt this today, if we can, with whatever modifications people want to propose, and go from that point.
So make a motion.
Well, I have a couple comments too.
Yeah, let's discuss this a bit more, because I agree with you, Bill. I think we have to we have to draw a line in the sand. The issue is going to be the startup, the criteria for starting up. And I believe an arbitrary date is not the right way to set the criteria. I think we're not going to, we should not try and make a judgment of when it's safe, because I think that's just a good way to make a bad decision for the benefit of the club. The criteria is when a large enough number of the members think it's safe,
Yeah,
that they will come out for a lunch.
exactly.
Mhm.
And that should be the basis when we draft this document. That should be the basis for establishing the starting date, is when we can get 16 to 20 people who acknowledge, hey, we're willing and ready. Okay, that's when we can start. And I think to try and force something other than that, we're just going to be in, we're going to have difficulty.
And I also think, Randy, when we do decide on that, we're going to have to probably reach out to people who either haven't been on Zoom or haven't been at the meetings and say, look, nothing's perfect, but we're getting back together now. We're going to make masks, hand sanitizer available. I mean, we're going to take precautions, but we've got to start sometime, and we need you to come support that, because we've gone back to our original due structure of paying for meals. We really need to get everybody in the club back together. So we might have to do a little digging and prodding people when we first start also, but you're right.
All right, I see you, David, and I'd like to get a couple of comments in. First of all, to start back, usually by early March, the weather is getting decent. So we could consider outside meetings at the park every week and have Roberta and the coffee house bring over food. If people are more comfortable being outside, I would be. I'll tell you that personally. Personally, regarding masks, I hate them. I can't go 15 minutes without my glasses steaming up when I'm inside, and I need to take the mask off to clear my glasses. I also have had several occasions where I've almost fainted from wearing a mask. When I'm in a store, I can run in there in 15 minutes and get out. I can wear the mask without having to fool with it. But after about 15 or 20 minutes, I got to find a little spot where I can go up and pull the mask away from my face so I can get some clean air so I don't pass out. So that's my personal beef with masks. If we elect to meet in person and say, well, when you're eating, you can take the mask off, well, then that defeats the whole thing. If you're not wearing a mask, then you're unsafe, especially when my food is sitting right in front of you and you're breathing all over it without your mask on. So I would not, if we're saying not wearing a mask is dangerous, then I would carry that to, I'm not taking my mask off, period. And if I need to, I will step outside every 15 minutes to clear my glasses and to get some breaths of fresh air. So my other choice is not to attend in person, and I would lean more towards that. For me personally, I would join the meeting virtually while everybody else who wants to be in person is in the room. I can't deal with the masks. So David, go ahead.
Thank you, Chuck. I certainly thought about the safety part. I think that's the key here. It's not how many people show up for the first meeting, it's safety. So I thought about our medical advice that we have in our club, having a great deal of input on when we actually implement, when we actually go back. So I certainly would defer to Paul and Mark, or whatever medical advice we think is the best way to review this. But again, I go to the grocery store. I have to once every 2 weeks, and I double mask and I wash my hands. In other words, I'm taking risk when I ride my bicycle with my grandson who goes to school every day. This is all about risk avoidance. We're not going to have a perfect situation, but there are churches and schools and businesses all over that are open for that are meeting, and they do what I'm recommending in my motion. I do it at Blue Heron Realty. We have at the front door medical mask, not cloth mask, but medical mask, hand sanitizer, and a sign on the door expressing our concern about the pandemic, and so that this is the reason why I think we need to take some bold action here. And when I say bold, I'm taking into consideration the risk factor. There is a risk that if we get back together in a month, there's always that risk. And so when you take your mask off to dine, well, at least everybody is aware of the risk, and they're doing their best to minimize it, rather than ignoring the safety precautions like we've been doing. Frankly, that meeting I went to on December 7th, I was the only one wearing a mask. Everybody was shaking hands and getting in their faces and talking, and nobody was paying attention to any safety protocol because it wasn't in their mindset. So by taking bold action like I'm talking about, it means communicating the safety precautions to our membership and letting them make the choice as to whether they follow it or not is really going to be, that's the way it is. Even the vaccination, Paul, are we going to ask people to show a card? No. You know, we're going to make it clear that we want you to be vaccinated. It's coming from our board. You know, it's coming from the leadership of the club. So by making this this motion, and if we pass it, it's a message to the membership from the leadership that we have worked this thing over and we have got a solid plan for getting back on track. So I don't think it's about finances. I don't think it's about how many people show up for the meeting. It's all about having our first meeting and doing it safely is the way I think we need to really focus on it as safely as we can.
But
Thanks
David,
so much for your
I
patience.
think
David,
the point you made earlier, and a number of us have made it, is we're interested in the health of the club. In other words, the club itself staying strong and staying together. And we're talking about minimizing the risk. On the downside of that, if we started having meetings, I would say, given the numbers that at least that I'm looking at, the chances of somebody in the club being infected at a meeting is pretty damn high. So what effect would that have on the club and on regenerating these meetings at some time in the future? So I think there's a risk both ways. And the odds on us escaping unscathed in that regard, I think are pretty darn slim.
Well, let me ask you, David, if we implemented your plan, if half of the people showed up at a meeting, let's say 16 people, if half of them were not wearing masks and you were, would you be at the next meeting?
You know, it's again, it's hard to say that. It's just, what if everybody, what if half the people were not comfortable wearing masks, but they washed their hands and they bumped fists rather than shaking hands, and we spaced the tables further apart. And in other words, if everybody is conscious of the safety precautions and we have, you know, more participation with it, that increases everyone's comfort level. It minimizes the risk. Look, we've got to start somewhere. I'm willing to see how it goes. I mean, we may have a meeting and guess what? Nobody will wear a mask or nobody will wash their hands and everybody's hugging and kissing. Well, then, you know, that'll tell us something. But again, I'm willing to give it a chance. And I'm worried about this club surviving. I'm worried about whether I really want to continue as a member with this Zoom business all the time. You know, I'm having my own doubts. And this is why I had to go forward and do something, because I'm very worried about the club's, you know, situation. Look, the other clubs have continued to have their meetings, haven't they? Aren't we the only club on the shore who's not having in-person meetings? And we're probably one of the few organizations on the shore that's not getting together.
Well, I can tell you at the district level, everything's gone virtual again. All the training sessions, everything is virtual again. And that started a few weeks ago when this Omicron started peaking.
And there's lots of events that have been canceled because of this explosion of COVID.
Yeah.
And I also want to say that when you came December 7th, the world was different than it is now.
Yeah.
The number of cases in Cape Charles was down to maybe one a week. We required vaccination, so I felt comfortable coming, even without people wearing masks. And I wasn't wearing a mask then. The last time we met, right before Christmas, the surge was just beginning again, and Dr. Clark and I both wore masks that day. We were I think the only ones, because we might have been more conscious of the situation than other people. But now, and then after that, I mean, it's just, we've never seen numbers like this before. So now is not the time. We've gone for, almost 2 years without meeting now, and it's tragic. And it's tragic that it's now been extended, but I don't think it's going to be extended more than another month.
Yeah, I'd like to suggest this, Paul, if I can interrupt you. David, it's commendable what you've done. What you've helped us do is structure the 2 or 3 factors that lead you to a decision to meet again. The primary one being the rate of infections, and you just came along with bad timing. I think it was a great idea, but coincidental with that, COVID just took off. So that's why you got a 0 vote last meeting. And I'm kind of nuts about this myself. I voted every time there was a vote to come back together. I'm kind of reckless in that regard. I might think, but what you've given us is a framework to make a decision, the rate of COVID, the cost of investment, and the most important thing is how many people we can get to feel comfortable. Until we get about 18 to 20 people that think as we do as a group here, we're probably just, getting nowhere. So what I would like to do is monitor those 3 factors week to week and make a decision using your structure, David. But I don't think we're able to pick the date because God knows where this thing is going. And we're out of touch with half of our membership. We don't know what they're really thinking. And we're going to have to fix that as well. So again, I think while we don't feel badly that we can't make a decision necessarily today, but I think we're in a position to make an informed decision when we do make it, looking at those 3 basic elements.
Bill, I
So-
would agree with that. I think
So,
that we should table the motion for today, and instead of trying to vote on the motion today and refine it, and we have to figure out how things are going so that we can. I would agree that the structure, and as I said at the beginning, David, your primary concern is the health of the members and the health of the club. I'm not going to say just the health of the club. Obviously, we're concerned about the health of the club as a whole, but we're also concerned about the individual members. So I think it's a great framework to work from as well. And thanks again so much for putting it together. I just don't believe that we're at a point where we're ready to make a vote on it today. Okay.
And
just-
maybe a couple more comments. First of all, I think when we do go back, we should go back with a meal piece of the due structure that's universal to everybody. To go on a pay of whether you show up, as that's when you pay. I don't like that idea. I think that's disruptive. So, and I'm looking at this from the standpoint of the guy that's going to spend next week trying to figure out how to create the dues invoices for the next quarter. And right now I'm not sure, but I want to lay that out to you, tell you what I intend to do, unless the board says I'm going off the short end of the board here. I'm going to put the dues together, excluding the meal cost, with the understanding that at least in the short term, we're going to meet virtually, and with a indication that at such time we decide that we will begin to meet in person, we will then put out a due structure reflecting whatever portion of a quarter that is, unless we fortunately or unfortunately start at the beginning of a quarter. So we will prorate it based on when we decide that starting date is going to be. Everyone will be billed for those meals. We have to then discuss the opt-out situation, because I think that'll create some problems. But that's what I would intend to do next week when I put the dues together, is basically be the same due structure as we've been using in the last couple of quarters. And we won't be tracking individual meal costs on a weekly basis, because we'll be meeting virtually until we decide that we're going to go with the recommendation. Yes, Paul.
I would agree with that 100%, Randy. And you can explain that in your cover email, that we will, when the club decides to start meeting in person again, that we will begin prorating the dues then, prorating the meal portion. And when we do, and I think at the next board meeting, we're going to have a lot better idea where this current surge is going. And I really believe that this is going to be the last really big surge, because this Omicron variant is so highly contagious that a large portion of the population is going to have gotten it. And I don't think there's going to be other really great big surges. So we will be able to see what's happened in the intervening month, and hopefully it'll be on its way down. And I think we can set a date to restart. And when we do that, I think a telephone tree to actually talk in person, somebody talk in person to every single member, to really be sure the knowledge is universal among our members, and strongly encourage everybody to come.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Again, consider early March, maybe we can start meeting in person outside.
Maybe late December. Well, I don't see any reason to meet outside, and then becomes weather dependent, and you know, it might rain, and but once this thing subsides in late February, I think it's going to, then we can meet safely in person again. Especially if we require vaccination still, and encourage mask wearing except when eating. And it doesn't totally defeat the purpose to take your mask off when you're eating, because you're only exposed to a few people then. And it's a matter of time, and it's a matter of the amount of viral load that you get during an encounter.
One other thing real quick, and then Bill Murphy has a comment. To your point, David, about Roberta. I feel the same way, but I talked to her, and I think Paul will back me up. She's been terrific through this whole thing, and she's backed our decisions up. And she said, don't worry about us. If you feel it's not safe to have meetings, that's fine. Just let her know. And either Paul or I have been in contact with her. She's been terrific through this whole thing. Paul, would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. Bill Murphy, you had something else to add?
Yeah, just final comment, so that we could possibly take one step in what we feel is the right direction here. How would the board feel about adopting David's motion with no date certain set in there? In other words, take out the January 25th and maybe reword it to say as soon as possible, or whenever however you want to word it, just take the date out. Because the rest of the stuff in there seems to be things that we're all pretty much in agreement with. Because I think we do need a policy. What date we put that policy into effect, I think there's a lot of room for discussion there. But we do need a policy. And this kind of says what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, and why we're going to do it. It just doesn't say exactly when we're going to do it, because that's obviously now's not the time to state that maybe. But at least it does say, as soon as it is felt that it's safe, we are going to go back. We are going to request that you follow these guidelines. And by the way, we are going to start building people like we always have before. So I think we can adopt the motion without the date certain in there, if that suits everybody else. And David, I guess the first person I'd ask about that would be you before we try to consider proposing an amended motion here.
Well, hey, rules of order require a second for any motion, and then in discussion, you would have amendments. You could amend the motion, but I like the way you're headed. I do think that we need to go to our membership with this next meeting coming up in a few minutes and say, here's what we've done. Because I got to say, this club is going to go into the toilet, man. I mean it. I'm ready to give up myself. I've gotten to the end of my rope with it too, And that's why I really want to see some action here. I think others do too. We're losing people. We're losing their interest. And this would be a great way to get folks back into the swing of things. I'm confident we're not making a mistake. Okay, but I like your idea, Bill. I have no problem with leaving the date open. Everything
Okay,
else.
I have one more important announcement, and then we're going to get on to the general membership meeting. We'll pick this up next board meeting. Reggie and I had a discussion this morning, and unfortunately, Reggie is not going to be able to continue as president-elect and become the president on July 1 for personal reasons, family reasons. And I'm going to leave it right there and ask Reggie if he would like to comment any further.
No, I don't need to
Have we
comment.
finished the business
further.
at hand on this? Have
This-
we finished with this topic?
Yes. Because we need to move on to the general member meeting. The general members are joining the meeting right now.
is noon.
We could have a special board meeting.
Yeah.
I think this deserves calling a special board meeting electronically within the next 5 days.
I would agree with that, Bill. I think it's premature to make a vote right now, but I would absolutely agree with a special board meeting as well.
Excellent, excellent. All
Let's
right.
just agree to continue this. Chuck, you set the date and time, but let's just continue this meeting.
All right.
Don't close this meeting. We'll continue this meeting at the date, at the time and date you designate.
Sounds good.
Thank you.